Hi, welcome to RCAM. I'm your host, Ryan, and thank you for tuning in today. And today we have a very special guest joining us on the show. I'd like to introduce you guys to Jonathan Asbun. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
Hey Ryan, good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you're here, man. So, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about who you are and maybe a little bit about how we met?
Sure, yeah. Well, I am from Bolivia, South America. I was born and raised in Bolivia. I've also lived in Guatemala for a number of years before moving back down to Bolivia. Um, I actually have a background in business management, uh, and then I went into theology. So I'm a missionary pastor in South America and a church planter alongside my wife, Kara. She's actually from Charlotte, North Carolina, and our two boys. Um, so we work in Bolivia in our home church, which is called Genesis Church Cochabamba. And we also work in partnership with a couple of foundations here, a couple of organizations. One of them works with orphans. So they run two homes, one for boys and one for girls, that has about 60 children who have been rejected by their parents, and they provide everything for them. And the other foundation that we work with is actually involved in rescuing children in high risk of prostitution. So what happens here is that prostitution is a generational type of work. So many times the grandma was on the business, and then the mom, and then the children. And I'm talking boys and girls. The boys, particularly, they can be used either for the sexual market or also to become the ones that manage the girls at a later age. So what this foundation is doing is cutting the cycle. They actually give the children, they make sure they go to school, and they also give them school support. So they help them with homework and different things after school programs. And they also have a psychologist and spiritual counselors and stuff. So they are helping them also to redefine themselves on different terms so they can cut that cycle.
It sounds like you guys are hitting it kind of on all different fronts, man. You're hitting a spiritual component, a mental component, and then you're also tackling their physical needs. That's awesome. That's incredible.
Yes, it's a holistic approach, and we're probably going to comment a little more about that and the history of that in a minute. But going back to how we met, before I that escapes me. Um, so Ryan came down here. Was it last year or a couple of years ago? I believe it was last
Actually,
year.
it was this year. Believe it or not, it seems like it's been longer, but it was this
That's
this February,
true.
right before COVID.
It feels like a lifetime ago, but that's true. It was this February, right before COVID,
We're
where
going on
COVID
COVID
was
years.
still. So yeah, so Ryan came down here with a team from the US to help us with a back to school outreach, because that's one of our biggest yearly outreaches. Which what we do is we provide, by the way, school here starts in February. Our seasons are the opposite in the US. So school year goes from February to November. So you guys came down here to help us with this outreach, which is our back to school outreach. And what we do is every year we make sure that children from both organizations have the supplies they need to go to school. That may include backpacks, basic school supplies such as notebooks, pens, pencils, everything else, and also school uniforms. Because public school here requires children to wear uniforms, and many of them cannot afford those uniforms. So we make sure they have them, and we try to make them brand new so they can have something new to take to school. Just a quick testimony about the backpacks. One of the foundations, because we haven't started the foundations, we don't directly run the foundations, we partner with them. And one of them, we started partnering only like about 3 years ago. And one of the first things we did was provide backpacks for the children to go to school. And when we gave them the backpacks, a lot of them were in tears. And one of the staff members told us that many of them used to carry their supplies, their school supplies, in garbage bags because that's all they had. So they will buy garbage bags, and that's what they use to take their school supplies. So for them, having a backpack, a brand new backpack to take to school, was really a big deal. And the point about this is to remind them that they are valuable, that they are individuals, that God loves them, that God remembers them, and that their lives are valuable, and that they can achieve anything in their lives holding God's hand.
Hmm.
So anyway, so that's how we met. You guys came down here and you saw a little bit of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, man, it was just such a privilege too to be a part of that and kind of just be, like it's one thing, like a lot of people they hear these stories. It's another thing to completely see it, man. And I remember a distinct moment while I was there. I mean, visiting one of the foundations and seeing the work that you guys did and Goretti did in the red light district was just incredible. And I just remember standing on top of this roof and looking around and it was being pointed out to me like all these different buildings that were actually brothels, and thinking to myself like, man, they're all over the place. But then in that moment, seeing the difference that you guys were making in the lives of these kids, it was just incredible. So that was really impactful for me. It really kind of shaped my experience there, and then also just to fill some of those school bags there, and now kind of hearing you talk about just how much difference the backpacks alone made is really encouraging. And it's something that I don't think we kind of appreciate here. We have what I like to call American privilege, and we don't really understand how things are outside the context of America and how good we really do have it. I mean, we have an abundance, usually more than we want. So going there was definitely a really great opportunity to kind of see firsthand some of the things that you guys do, and then also get to connect with you. I think one of the moments that I really knew me and you connected was we were talking about politics and politics in Bolivia, and I thought it was just refreshing to hear somebody talk about politics from kind of a different perspective than what I'm used to here in America. So I guess this is a good segue into kind of the next topic. So I guess for those watching, can you share with us a little bit about what politics are like in Bolivia?
Sure, yeah. So let me summarize it this way, okay? We had a government coup in 2003. Actually, sorry, my date is wrong. We had elections in 2003. The president got elected. He resigned in 2005 because of the pressure, the build-up pressure, the social unrest, civic unrest. The vice president, by constitution, became the president. He lasted 6 months and he resigned again. The next in line was the president of the house here, like the speaker of the house. That's what you guys call it. He lasted a week. And then after that, they just called the president of the Supreme Court, like what do you call the main justice?
Okay.
Became an interim president. He had to call elections for 6 months, and the party that overtook the government became the president. Okay?
Okay.
He changed the constitution 3 times in order to remain in power for 14 years. So the first time was a legal change of the constitution. The second time was more of a judicial shenanigans. And then the last part, he just claimed that it was his human right to continue in power forever. So when he did that, there was another civil unrest, and I'm talking November last year. So November last year, we had elections, and that's when he claimed that it was his human right to be continuously re-elected. There was a lot of social civic unrest in the American States Organization. I forget the name in English, but Organización de Estados Americanos. That's what it's called in Spanish. I'm sorry, it just slipped me in English. But it's pretty much is the group that involves all the Central, North, and South American states. It's kind of like the United Nations for the Americas. Okay. So they did an audit of the election, and they determined that there was a fraud. So when they determined that, Uh, the whole Bolivian society, and that included military, police, and the civil society, um, created a lot of unrest. So he resigned. After 14 years, he resigned. He escaped to Argentina. An interim government came with a job to call for elections within 3 months. That was November. 3 months was January. In January, they set the dates for the elections for April. COVID hit, so they postponed the elections, and finally we had elections in October this year. October 18th was election Sunday. By the way, elections here are mandatory, so it's not just a right to vote, it's an obligation.
Oh, wow.
When you go and cast your ballot, they will give you a voting ID. I actually have it with me if you want to see it. It's like a little piece of paper. It's very, very, very basic. Just looks like this. I'm going to cover the information, but looks like that. So they give you that, and you need that for the next 90 days after elections to do any kind of paperwork. This means renewing your driver's license, renewing your ID, doing any kind of banking transactions, doing traveling inside the country or international traveling, anything like that. You need to present this voting credential. So if you don't have it, you don't get to do any of that. So you actually need to go and pay a fine, or you need to show good reason why you couldn't vote. So voting is mandatory. We had elections, and the outcome was that same party from that guy that stayed there for 14 years, they ended up winning on a landslide for the presidency. But we had a split Congress. So the Senate, they lost the majority of the Senate, and they lost the majority of the House. But the transfer of power, the current Congress that is supposed to transfer power still has the majority of that party. So they changed the rules of Congress to a simple majority, so they can still have a complete ruling in the country. And that's where we are right now.
It's a little weird hearing you say some of what you're saying, because I've heard kind of what's happening now being described as a coup. I've heard that being said. So we're kind of in like limbo mode right now, where we don't know what's going to happen with our election. It does look, as of right now, like Trump is going to lose. That's what it looks like. And it looks like that they'll be taking everything to the courts. But I mean, there are a lot of people that are legitimately concerned that our election has been undermined. So that's a little nerve-wracking. So we're going to see what happens. But yeah, it's kind of a little similar, kind of seeing how things are kind of being undermined. I know we heard for the past 4 years that there was like Russian interference in our election. So, I think that was part of what kind of eroded people's trust in our system. And now we're seeing little pockets of things pop up that are now being kind of looked into. So, yeah.
There is so one thing that happens, let me put it this way, because I'm gonna kind of arrive into a similarity and a difference at the same time. What is called the 21st century socialism, which was established philosophically as an ideal by Hugo Chavez from Venezuela.
Okay.
Of course, he was a follower of Castro, but Castro is a military dictatorship. That needs to be understood. Castro overtook the government by force. Rafael Correa in Ecuador, and Ortega in Nicaragua, Evo Morales here, the Kirchners in Argentina, Chavez and now Maduro in Venezuela, all of them came into power through democracy. So the danger with this movement is that they use democracy to gain power, and once they have it, they manipulate democracy to remain in power for an unlimited amount of time. So the way they do it, and they did it in all these countries, is the exact same process. You come to power, then you start first. You get rid of the judiciary, so it still exists. But what they do is that they get rid of all the judges, and they put their own judges, and so The justice it only serves the president, and then Congress is not an independent body. It's also in service of the president. So what you really have is what you would call a democratic monarchy or a democratic dictatorship. Why?
Wow.
Because you have one guy sitting on the chair and he calls all the shots. So he changed law with a tweet. And you're not, and this is where people probably don't make the connection in the States, because sometimes they say that the president of the States is making policy with a tweet. I think Trump was very reckless in many things he did, but his tweets are not legally binding.
No, they're not.
You know, and you have a Congress that can still check on the presidency.
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case here. Here, they pass, let me give you an example. They pass a law that had to do with a penal code, so that everything that has to do with crimes and punishment. There was a lot of civic unrest. The president sent a tweet and say, "I am telling Congress to replace this law by tomorrow." Next day, first thing in the morning, that law got replaced.
Wow.
He had a judge ruling against him, and he throws a tweet, and he says on his Twitter, "This judge has ruled against us, and he's against the country, so he's going to be replaced tomorrow, and he's going to be processed." The DA goes, arrests the judge, drags him out, finds another judge that finds him guilty of whatever they fabricated, and they put a new judge in his place.
Wow.
So the judges,
they completely, I guess, slander the judge to remove them.
They don't even need to slander a person. They just need to, because everything works for them. You see, the judiciary is theirs, Congress is theirs, and the executive is theirs. Wow. So the rhetoric is very similar, but the consequences are very different at this point. Because in the US, whether you like it or not, you still have these checks and balances. You can still have judges ruling against the government. And you don't have the fear that these judges are going to be dragged into prison and put a different judge on their place. Or that Congress is going to react to a tweet from the president. React on the sense that they will be obedient to whatever the president tweets, you know?
Okay.
But I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense.
So the Congress can react to a tweet, but they don't need to be obedient to a tweet, which is not the same.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the things that are said about our president on Twitter. A lot of people like to call him a fascist, but I'm like, I don't think a fascist would respond the way that Trump responded. You would not be able to say what you're saying about him being in power without getting kind of silenced. We live in a democracy.
Even if he were, the U.S. system as it is right now does not allow for that to happen.
Yeah,
but that's the danger with things that are being talked, like packing the courts, creating more states. So they want to make DC and Puerto Rico states. And it's not about DC or Puerto Rico. It has nothing to do with that. If they deserve it or not, it should be done under merit. But when you start tweaking democracy to serve you, eventually you lose democracy. And that's exactly what has happened in all of these 21st century socialist countries. All this group of people. Now, needs to be said that politicians in the US, such as Bernie Sanders, AOC, have been vocally endorsing this type of governments. So there was a big surprise in the US election of Trump carrying so much of the Latino vote.
Yeah.
But a lot of the Latino vote he's carried is from people. Now you probably won't see Bolivians because there are not that many, although it's a couple of million Bolivians in the States. But many Bolivians, Venezuelans, and Cubans, when they hear socialism, they understand the real situation, not the book, not the ivory tower, Harvard-educated lawyer lecturing people on guilt, but the real on-the-ground situation of socialism and socialism inevitable outcome of dictatorship. So all these people said, okay, we don't like Trump at all as a person, but if it's either 4 more years of Trump or socialism, we're going to choose 4 more years of Trump. And that's the decision of people that have lived under socialism. It's like, let me put it this way: I'd rather be beat with a club than going back there.
Yeah, and you know what's wild about that is that I mean, I've kind of been following that story too, and immediately they're being, everybody that voted for Trump, the Cuban Americans that voted for, they're racist. I'm like, maybe they see something that we don't, maybe maybe they identify something that we just can't see, and they see it manifesting here. Maybe they have a different perspective because they live this. I mean, they see what it was actually like, and they see the writing on the wall. A friend of mine, man, or actually a commentator I listened to, he said that he basically made a comparison where he's like, all these other countries that are experiencing socialism, we're all on the same train. There's just a few cars ahead of us, and we're all heading in the same direction. But people don't want to see that. And I think it's part of the reason because we become really comfortable. So I guess what is your perspective, I guess, kind of on what's going on here in America, especially with this election happening? A lot of crazy things happening right now.
Well, you were dealt with a very bad hand. Let me put it that way. Trump is not a good figure, and then you have, I don't know about Biden, but Kamala, in all honesty, she's endorsed this kind of far extreme socialism. And again, the problem with socialism is not what it looks like in paper; is what it looks like in reality.
The thing with Biden is that you mentioned AOC and Bernie Sanders. I mean, they recently did a live feed where they're talking about their goals, and their number one goal is to remove Trump. It looks like they're on their way to do that. And then their number two goal is to make Joe Biden the most progressive president in history. And that, to me, I'm like, oh man, like what does that mean? And what does that look like? And now that you mentioned them backing some of the people in your country, that's nerve-wracking.
So the thing with Bernie Sanders, you can disagree earnestly with him, but you still need to give him some respect because the guy really does know what he's talking about and he knows where he's going. He's been to Cuba, he's been to Venezuela, and I just don't understand why he would go there, not to the country to visit, but why would he want the U.S. to resemble that? He just have a completely different worldview. But then you have, and this is the thing, okay, you have to respect him because he knows where he's headed to and he knows what he's doing. But people like AOC, the big problem with them is that they are extremely ignorant people. And I'm sorry to put it this way. I know a lot of people are going to get offended about this. But they discuss a lot about American privilege, but another thing that people don't talk about that much, and it's because Americans don't like to hear this, it's American ignorance. On the sense that most Americans really don't know the outside world. They don't understand the outside world, outside the US. So whatever is being told to them about the outside world, they believe it. And they believe it according to this new fragility that is there. Like we are guilty about something. Everybody's guilty about something. So whatever is going wrong with the world is our fault. And they don't understand that the US, it feels, on a sense, the hope of a free world is not perfect, but is the only place where certain freedoms are taken for granted. Freedoms such as freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of movement. You can come and go freely wherever you want. Those rights that Americans take for granted do not exist in 99% of the world. So freedom of speech is not a reality. Freedom of the press is not a reality. If you try to go to Argentina, Venezuela, or here in Bolivia and grab a news outlet like and have them treat the president as CNN has treated Trump, or conversely, as Fox News has treated Obama, that news outlet will be shut down and the people that run it will be in prison.
Wow.
So when Americans don't understand what they have, like the freedom that they have, the democracy that they have, and when you have people like Bernie Sanders praising these dictators, you're not talking about economic models. You're talking about worldviews. And that's where the danger comes. And then you have people like AOC again that has a lot of resentment and anger. And match that with ignorance. Because I don't know if she's even gone to college or not, but I know she hasn't lived outside the country. I know she's never seen firsthand the need and what's going on in these places. So she just drank the Kool-Aid and she doesn't know what she's talking about in the real world. And then you have these, and I'm going to finish with this, I'm sorry, but you have these ivory tower professors. And we run a lot of teams here that come, like youth groups and adult teams that come to do a lot of social work. In one of the guest houses that we use, a couple of times we run with into Harvard and Yale youth groups coming to do social research. And I'm going to tell you, man, these kids have no idea what they're talking about. They can be Harvard graduates and they have their big professor here. And I'm sitting on the adjacent table, eating my lunch with my team, and I'm hearing this professor telling them about our country, where we live and how things are. And I'm like, this guy is making $100K a year for talking a bunch of things that are not just simply not true. These people don't know what they're talking about, but they get to do that because there's nobody to challenge them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's nobody to challenge them. So they're the new American educated class is being educated by a bunch of people that have read a bunch of books, but they have no idea what they're talking about in the real world. So you have this combination of the elites and then the AOC type of politicians that are trying to drive the US to a place that they don't even understand. And that's the big danger with this new progressive movement. Has nothing to do with their economic policies. It has to do with the worldview that they are adopting and the people that they are backing up outside the US and what these people are doing.
And that worldview is really entrenched in everything, man. It's in everything, man. All the major corporations have got on board, and they're all having social justice classes taught in the corporate setting. I mean, it's seeped into kind of every fabric of society, and pretty quick, man. You know, I've seen how quickly things have changed, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse, very fast. Because even 2014, I don't remember things being as divisive as they are today. And now, flash forward, and things are pretty crazy. You know, to the point where you know, people are denying that gender is a real thing. That's happening here. A lot of people have bought into that. And you know, people are running, you know, full force with a lot of this social justice I guess, movement without fully even understanding it. I mean, a lot of people, you know, just briefly, I want to talk about Black Lives Matter, you know, and just, you know, for those of you watching, I support Black Lives Matter. I do, but not the organization, because the organization itself, called Black Lives Matter, is attached to some pretty nefarious things. I mean, they want to destroy the nuclear family, but this is the vehicle that they're using to kind of, I guess, push a lot of this agenda through, and it's nerve-wracking, man.
It is, and before I say anything, just remind everybody there that I am not a white male. I am actually by ethnicity half Palestinian, half Bolivian.
So you're not racist. That's good.
I don't know, but I am just not. I'm not white, so I am a minority, and I am actually the grandchild of Palestinian immigrants. My dad was first generation here. My mom is Bolivian by a long tradition, and I lived in Central America for a number of years, and I've been to the U.S. I've been to half of the country. I visited 26 states over the years, and there is a lot of truth in what not the organization, but the people, the movement of Black Lives Matter is talking about. There's a lot of truth behind that, and there's a lot of truth behind certain parts of the progressive movement. There's a lot of coldness, hardness in the U.S. traditional culture. People can be individualistic to the fault.
Yeah.
So there is a social responsibility of looking after your neighbor, and that's very ingrained in group culture, like the South American culture, where the individual comes second after the group. So it's always that the culture is always, the society is always looking for the betterment of the group in spite of the individual. Counter to the United States culture, which is more looking for the good of the individual in spite of the group, traditionally speaking. So there has to be some sort of balance. The problem with the progressive movement is that it lumps everything into one big bag. So LGTB, feminism, minorities are all considered the same. And I believe that's a big disservice to each group, because each individual group is not the same. And let me put it this way, and this is going to really, really upset some of your listeners, but it's true.
Hey, man, I'm after truth, bro.
Feminism is all a traditional, not a new wave of radical feminism. The traditional feminism is the reivindication of women. And that's a good movement. Women need to have the same place as men in society. But women is not something you choose or you become. Women is something you are.
Agreed.
So when someone is born when somebody is born a woman, then that person has every right to be treated as anybody else in society. Same rights, same respect, same protections, or even more protections, because woman has certain abilities that man doesn't have, like carrying life. So that needs to be protected. That woman needs to be protected. Absolutely. So feminism is one thing. Then you have homosexuality, and homosexuality is a moral choice. Now, based on your faith, you can agree or disagree with them, but that doesn't mean that you should have legislation to punish them or not punish them based on your faith. As citizens of a country, they're just making a moral choice, and a moral choice is something you should do freely, although I could disagree with their lifestyle based on my faith. But then you have, for example, transgenderism, and transgenderism is not a moral choice or something that you're born with. It's a biological choice. And so you're on a completely different realm there, because a gay person is a person that just likes another person from the same sex. But a transgender person is a person that claims to be biologically and physically something that they are not. And now they are imposing a male being able to go into a female private quarter. And the female has to, and vice versa, a female decided to go into a male's area, and the males need to accept that. So and then let's go, the minorities, because what does being black, being Hispanic, or being Asian has to do with your moral choice, with your sex, or or with your gender identity. So when you're putting everything together in one, you're creating this huge monolithic group that is not the same. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
is there racism? Yes, there is. Is it systemic to the fault? Probably not, but there is certain wounds that need to be healed. Hispanics and blacks have certain, and Native Americans, certain grievances that are right. But when you want to put that at the same level as female grievances, and as gay grievances, and as transgender grievances, they are not the same. They cannot be addressed all at the same, as the same.
Yeah. No, I agree
So,
with that. There needs to be kind of a distinction made between each of the groups.
but if you read, not as much Marx, but if you read the new socialism, the new wave of socialism, especially starting in the 1970s, 1990s, this is Marxism transferring to social issues. So what they realized is that the idea of Marx was a fight between classes, social economic classes. So they were going to take the power based on the working class, and they tried it in Russia. It didn't work, so they just switched it and said, okay, economics is not the road, identity is the road. So it's the same core values. And you can read people like Millet, Firestone, the writers of the 1990s, the new feminist movement, and what they write about Marxism. And you're going to realize that it's the exact same principle. They are just transferred to a new group. So it's in their best interest.
I think that's a better vehicle too, because people are generally now pretty confused about their identity. I mean, that's kind of the social chaos that's happened here. Is we see a lot of people that are confused about our identity, which I think is a good segue for us to talk about what the role of the church is in politics and in this I guess this social dilemma that we're experiencing. Not just here, but I know it's all over the world, man. It's happening. So what do you think the church's involvement in modern politics is?
That's a really good question. Just let me say something really quickly before I answer that question, because I don't want people to misconstrue or believe that because what I'm saying about the far left, we are some sort of endorsing or supporting Trump or the far right. Nothing is farther from the truth. I believe Trump was the architect of his own failure because he capitalized on something, and then instead of using what he got to actually bring people to a healing place, he just doubled down on the same things. And he actually stirred the pot, and he beat the drum until it broke. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. I think that was kind of right from the get-go. That was always kind of one of my issues with Trump is, I liked a lot of the policies actually the Republican Party had, but Trump's character, man, I just remember in 2016, I was pretty critical of him because I just didn't like the way that he carried himself. I thought he was proud. I thought he was boastful. I thought he was a lot of these different things and a little bit divisive, and it made me uncomfortable with him, to be honest. And I think a lot of people kind of hold that view. But don't completely write him off because of the policies that the Republican Party endorses.
Yeah. So going back to the question about the church, let me start with the negative part of the answer. The church should not do and is not called to do is become politicized. And there is a difference between being political and being politicized. I don't know if it carries as good in English as I'm thinking in Spanish, but being political means addressing the political reality, and you cannot be apolitical. Any statement you make to a certain degree is political, like you're talking about generosity, you're talking about rights, you're talking about values. It will affect policy one way or the other. But being politicized means to start tying yourself or endorsing certain political groups, certain parties, or certain movements as godly.
Yeah.
or as anointed or endorsed by God Himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very dangerous path, because the role of the church is to be above that. So the role of the church, as stated by God, is to be a light that shines in the darkness of the world. And it's also a prophetic voice for justice.
Yeah.
But the counterpart to that, so you're talking about a light that shines in the darkness, which means that the church has the role to show a different path.
Absolutely.
And then this prophetic voice for justice is the voice that the church, and when we're talking the church, we're talking both the institution and the person. Because the church as an institution should do certain things, but also Christians as individuals or as groups have the same calling and the same responsibility. And that prophetic voice for justice is the church's voice to call for justice, to say this is unjust. But then there is also the practical level of the church. The church should be an example of giving love, mercy, compassion, generosity. So it's not just calling out what is wrong, it's also living what is right.
Absolutely.
So the church, and the church has done it for several years, but lately it's something that is being a little neglected in many ways. The American church, the European church, have sent missionaries throughout the world through centuries. And these missionaries weren't just preachers, they were doctors, they established hospitals, they established universities. The US educational tradition is because of the church. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all of them were established by the Puritan people that came to the United States, and they wanted to educate people. Hospitals were started by Christians. The idea of a hospital didn't exist before Christianity. So the church has been a voice for the poor, the weak, the sick throughout the ages. And it's just recently that the church has kind of forgone that mission and decided to just tackle social issues. So there needs to be both parts. And this goes back to the politicization, because today in the church, you have two groups of people. You have the people that think that Trump is so bad and his rhetoric is so terrible that if you vote for him, you're an ungodly, evil person.
Yeah.
So I have people tell me that my faith will never allow me to side with a Republican.
Yeah.
And then you have the counterpart, when you have people that say that if you vote Democrat, you're an ungodly, terrible person because of their social issues and things like that.
Yeah, I agree
and
with
the
that.
truth is that if you put your trust, your values on either one, you really are being ungodly, on the sense that you're doing exactly what God tells you not to do. God says that the man should not trust on the man for salvation. I know how it goes exactly in Spanish, but I don't want to curse in English by translating it wrong, because it says, damned is the man that trusts in another man. That's how it goes in Spanish.
Yeah.
That's Jeremiah. I don't know how it goes exactly in English, but for God, when the church places its trust in a political party, the church is really going into apostasy. It's changing God for a human system.
Yeah. I agree with that, man, because there are people, man, that, I mean, they hero worship Trump. And when you hero worship any man, you're inevitably going to be disappointed. But then there are also people on the other end that where they viscerally hate the guy, and both, when they're coming from Christians, both behaviors are equally detestable and equally, I would say, sinful, because they're both, one, you're acting toward hatred of somebody else that's made in the image of God, and two, you're worshiping somebody as they are the image of God, and both are an issue.
Yeah. So what's the role of the church in politics, in elections? Well, there's two different sides to that. What is my role on an election, and what is my role as a citizen and as an institution named the church on a day-to-day basis? On election day, you have to vote. Is the law of the land, is how it works, is your right. So what you do as a Christian, you go and you cast your ballot. And you do it in completely freedom of conscience, understanding that you are not choosing a Messiah. You're choosing a person that is going to overall run the country in a direction that you think is the best. But you need to understand that either side is not a God-given side. He's going to make mistakes and he's going to do godly and ungodly things. So you just put those on the balance and say, okay, so between these two, I'm going to go with this one. You know, understanding that that's my civic duty and that's this is where I believe the country should go, and I'm going to do that. Hmm. But that's a duty that you have in a specific given moment, which is when you're going to cast your ballot. But then as a church, both the church as a body, as an institution, and then the Christian as an individual, should be again that voice that goes beyond that. It doesn't matter who I voted for. When that person is doing what's right, I am going to applaud them. I'm going to celebrate them. And when that person is doing what's wrong, I'm going to denounce them, because that's my role as a Christian. It's not to defend a person to a fault or to hate a person to a fault. It's to be a voice for justice, for truth. So the church should be above that. It shouldn't be Republican or Democrat, blue or red, or any other color. Here in Bolivia, it's purple and green. The church should really just be a voice of justice, truth, freedom, reconciliation, peace, you know? So that's where the church should come and say, as a Christian, it doesn't matter who I voted for. I'm going to celebrate their rights and denounce their wrongs. But then my lifestyle is going to reflect that. I am a generous person. I'm a forgiving person. I'm a loving person. You know?
Yeah, our identity should lie with Christ and not a particular political party. And I think sadly, a lot of people do get lost in that. They're strictly Democrat, or they're strictly Republican, and that they've kind of lost their identity in Christ and all this, and that's a tragic thing to see kind of happen. But I do agree with you. We do have to get involved. We do have to stand for justice and stand for action. I think many people too put their faith in the government. Or this party or that party, because in a lot of ways, I think some of the church has failed. I mean, they've been busy building up their own kingdoms and focusing on just building up their church building, but they forget the people inside of it, and then they forget the people in their communities. I mean, when I think about who should really be meeting the needs of the people, our first thought, in my opinion, shouldn't be the government meeting the needs of the people. Our first thought should be, I can go to that church for help. I can turn to Christians for help. If I'm poor and I'm in need, I know that they will help me. And that should be kind of the first inclination of our heart, is to take care of those who are in need, to care for the poor, care for the needy, and care for those who actually need help, and stand for truth and justice when something horrible does happen. I do think that's the role, and I think we've kind of missed it. And I think that, there are some churches that are getting back there. I know your church is, man. You were sharing, earlier, some of the stuff that you guys are doing, and it's beautiful. And I my hope and my prayer is that more of that stuff starts to happen in the American church. Where we kind of focus on meeting the immediate needs of the people around us and being a source of hope, love, and healing for the people around us, instead of what political party we're in line with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's speaking for us, for our experience and what we try to do, it's a very delicate path, because part of showing love is telling the truth. And that's one of the things that the world today has forgotten.
Yeah.
Me disagreeing with you doesn't mean that I don't love you or that I don't respect you. I can disagree with your lifestyle and still be there for you if you need me. But today, the new concept is that you have to support me in whatever decision I make in order to be called my friend or whatever. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
And so the role of the church has gone to one of two extremes. has gone either to that hardcore traditional extreme where we are just angry with everybody because your lifestyle doesn't agree with us, or we have gone to that other extreme to, in order to just gain people for Christ and show God's love to people, we say everything is okay.
Yeah.
And Jesus is neither one of them.
Yeah.
Jesus was able to show love, mercy, and grace to the worst of sinners, but in every single conversation, he will tell them, go and sin no more.
Yes, he did not endorse their sin or support their sin. And I think that's part of what it does mean to be loved is, I think if we're truly being loving, we don't want to see our brother or sister struggling in sin, and we don't want to leave them there. So we want to try to pull them out of it and identify it so that they can turn away from it. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about repentance is that we could turn away from it. But there's no, a lot of Christians are afraid to actually call people, I guess, out to a degree and call them into a better life. And I think, I would agree with you. Is that there is this kind of polar opposite ends, and people embrace, churches end up adopting sin, and then churches end up, I guess, turning people away because that they hate the sin, I guess, so much that they can't separate the sin from the person. But God loves that person. He hates their sin, but he wants them to turn away from it and turn to a better way, his way.
Let me just give you a practical example from this year. So because of COVID, Bolivia went into a major lockdown, a major shutdown. So for 90 days, people weren't allowed to leave their homes. Everybody was locked down in their house. And you could only leave your house once a week for 4 hours just to go to the grocery store. And it was based on your ID number. So what did that mean? In order for me to go get supplies for my house, I'd have to walk down the street because there was no cars, walk to the grocery store once a week, get my supplies, walk back home. And there were military checkpoints on the street. So whenever I get a checkpoint, I will have to show my ID and make sure that I was walking on the right day and right hour. And if they find me on the wrong day, they will throw me in jail. So that's how it was. That happened for 90 days. After 90 days, they started opening up a little by little. And now we're kind of back to normal, but we're talking 7 months later. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of small businesses have completely shut down. Many people are literally don't have any source of income right now. So one thing we started doing as a church is providing food baskets. Every week, we will deliver food baskets to people from our community, not just from the church. When I mean community, I mean literally the community of the city or neighborhood. And so we provided so far about 800 food baskets, and we send just a message and say, hey, we have every week we have so many food baskets. If you know anybody that is in need, let us know. We're going to make sure that we arrive to their home with a food basket. It's completely free and no strings attached. And we have had amazing testimonies of people like in tears. I had a guy just telling me the other day, we just cracked our last egg this morning and we didn't know what to tell our kids because we didn't have food for lunch. And you guys just showed up with this food basket and now we can feed them again. But we don't ask, are you Christian? Are you not a Christian? Are you black? Are you white? Are you Latino? Are you gay or are you not gay? We don't care. We are there to show you love and grace. And that's the role of the church. We are not loving based on who you are. We're loving based on who God is. But then, if those people, we always pray with them. That's all. We just want to pray with them. And we invite them to church. And if they come to church, they're going to be received and accepted as they are. But as they walk with Christ, they are going to be confronted with a lifestyle that God has for them. And that is going to mean make adjustments for all of us. And all of our sexuality needs to make adjustments because we're all fall. We all have some perversions in our heads. All of our human interactions, the way I treat my wife, the way I treat my children, the way I treat my neighbor, has to be readjusted constantly.
Yeah.
By the word of God. So that's what I mean by the church confronting people. It's not going and telling you, because you're a sinner, you should change. It's telling you, hey, what does the word of God says about this particular instance? And how can we realign ourselves to that? And that's what reconciliation, forgiveness, and transformation means. So we show love to everybody. We don't care who you are. We're there for you. But we also stand up for something,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And when our beliefs clash with your lifestyle, we're gonna still love you, but we're not gonna um, compromise our Lord just to make you feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, man, that's beautiful. So, as we wrap up things here, man, I love that there you have that practical approach where your church isn't just a church that is talking about things; you're actually doing things. You put your faith into action, and you're actually making a difference in the lives of families. Man, you're feeding families, taking care of families, partnering with the foundations to pull these kids out of the red light district and care for those women and children. So why don't you just tell, I guess, my audience just a little bit how to get involved in that? Because, you know, me personally would love to support you, and I'm sure other people are probably going to be interested in what you're doing and would want to see how to actually put our faith into action and support somebody who's actually making a difference and meeting the needs of people. Because I know things have been difficult in Bolivia, especially in light of COVID.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So the easiest way to do it is through our webpage. We're part of a mission that is called Commission to Every Nation. It is based in Texas. So it's cten.org dash Jonathan Asbun. And I don't know if you can put it somewhere in the comments
Yeah,
or in the
I'll end
description
up
later.
putting any link that you need. It'll be right in the comment section.
Awesome. So it's cten.org slash Jonathan Asbun. You can just go there. It has a little tab that says donate. You can do a one-time donation or an ongoing donation. And you can also do it through PayPal. And PayPal is at Jonathan Asbun. And then you'll just come to us. You can do a general donation that we can just allocate to whatever the ministry need is. Or you can just put a little note there, say, hey, for food baskets or Christmas outreach or back to school outreach, and we'll make sure to allocate it for the proper destination. So you can do it on PayPal or you can do it to our webpage. Either one works.
Okay, cool. And how would people connect with you on social media if they want to follow you?
Yeah. Well, you can follow our church. It's most of the church material is in Spanish, but you can just look for Génesis Cochabamba. Cochabamba is the name of the city, and Genesis is just the word. You can find Génesis Cochabamba, and we have a Facebook page, we have a YouTube channel. Personally, you can look for me on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on YouTube, just Jonathan Asbun, my name, cool. And you'll find me in any of the social media. My social media is a little bit of a mixed match between English and Spanish. But I interact in both languages with no.
Yeah, no I follow your post, man. So Google Translate, man, is a beautiful thing, and Facebook now auto translates it. So I'm like, I can see all this in English. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's one of the good things about Facebook.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, I just wanted to thank you for joining us today. I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing in Bolivia, and for you to just share kind of your insight into what's going on in politics and how the church can get involved. Thank you for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for the time, and thank you for all the work that you are doing upstate New York and all the people that you're helping and the great work that you're doing. And thank you for your courage to just speak truth on the social media. And we're praying for you, man. We really appreciate it. We're also following you. And for everybody that has listened to us, just my prayer for you is that if you're in America, you just realize how blessed you are and you're thankful to God for the place where you live and appreciate and value it. You can live either way of the aisle. But just remember that you really are in a blessed place and be thankful and grateful for that. And reach out to others and also be generous to those around you. Just show God's love to people. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem. And hey, thank you guys for tuning in. God bless you guys. Have a great day. Deuces.